Farming Simulator. What is it? To answer that, we need to break the title down to two words: farming and simulator. Farming is the act of growing crops or livestock and selling the said crops or livestock. A simulator is a realistic scenario enactment device, usually as a software, but occasionally as a physical enactment. There is a simulator for just about everything. Want to build a house? Boom, construction simulator. Want to demolish a house? Boom, demolition simulator. Want to drive a train? Boom, conductor simulator. Want to drive a truck? Boom, American truck simulator. Don't like driving on the right side of the road? There's also a European one too. Well, you get the picture. There's a simulator for just about everything out there, from building cities to ordinary house chores that you have been procrastinating on doing. And back to the topic of today's video, Farming Simulator. Farming Simulator has had quite the history, with the game first being released in 2008. It was not the most riveting, let alone graphically appealing, but keep in mind that in the same year we also got the biggest disappointment of Star Wars: The Force Unleashed. From that first one, they made great improvements and re-released Farming Simulator in 2009, and branded it as it is. You'll never guess this, but it was called Farming Simulator 2009. A very exciting title for a very exciting game. After that, they started the trend of releasing a main game every 2 years, with updates and downloadable content being released regularly in between those 2 years, and additionally a sub-game usually for mobile devices such as phone or now Nintendo Switch, 3DS, things like that, in between each major release. With each iteration of the game, the new mechanics were added, things like cows, new crop types, and most importantly what keeps the game alive and bringing new life to the game series, new equipment. Speaking of more than one way to play, there are many ways to play Farming Sim. Want to be a traditional farmer who plants a small section of land using modest equipment? You can do that. Want to be a large farmer who plants hundreds of acres using large equipment? You can do that. Want to drive a truck around and haul equipment? You can do that. You can even do unrealistic things, like pull the heaviest tools with the smallest tractor available, or do the exact inverse of that, which, in my opinion, looks really ridiculous. If you want to race cars around, you can do that. You can even drive a monster truck, jump ramps, if you have decided to pick up Farming Simulator instead of something more logical like Monster Jam Steel Titans 2, that was made exactly for that. Game mechanics are the most important part of any game, from things that the player does to things that the game does behind the scenes. Let's start with player side game mechanics. It's all good. You can drive forwards, you can drive backwards, you can look up, you can look down, you can even jump. Only complaint I have would be the amount of buttons you need for more complex things, but you can get away with using only the basic ones if you don't want to spice up your game with mods. More on that later. As for behind the scenes mechanics, there's a little to be desired. There are two main problems I have with Farming Sim. They are the AI and the physics engine. The AI is just a hot mess, from traffic that rams your tractor to helpers that get stuck in trees and destroy your hard work. With each game, it seems that the AI is getting worse, with traffic that does not see your tractor at all and just barrels right through you, sending you into the stratosphere, or just hired help that does not know where the bounds of the fields are and just go on and do their own thing. Thankfully, the developers know about these problems and have implemented a toggle for traffic, so you can turn it off completely and be alone in the game, or hired help, which has been somewhat improved with each game, but honestly it's just a hot mess and you should avoid it altogether unless you have mods. Yes, I said mods. Some guys who have a bit more free time than any normal person does have managed to improve what a multi-million-dollar company couldn't. I'll give the developers some credit for adding these improvements with each game they release, but I still feel that the modders do it better. As for physics, there is a bit to be desired. You can launch things into the stratosphere if you're looking at it wrong. You can fly to the moon if you stand on top of something while holding it and jumping, but this is a semi-common problem with all games that have players interacting with objects that are affected with gravity and the player. I'll give them a pass on the flying bug, but unstable boxes that like to fly off are not acceptable. It's a similar case to the AI where each game the quality sort of lowers. At one point, users of the Farming Simulator subreddit r/Farming Simulator have complained that they can't even use some of the equipment in game because it's just too unstable and not worth the risk of losing objects. The game lives because of mods. It's the community that keeps the game alive. The developers are limited by what they can legally add into the game due to licensing issues, but that's where modders shine. They are under no obligation to seek out licenses due to the fact that they have created third-party software that is heavily inspired by the real-life counterparts that just so happen to look the same. Much like first-gen Toyota Tundras looks like an off-brand Ford F-150. The developers know that their game would not survive without these people producing extensions for their game. They know this so well that they have implemented in-game support, mod collection site, and mod creation tools available for everyone for the low price of free. Their collection site only has one limitation, being that the mods have to be pre-approved by the developers so they can be imported for both computer and console versions of the game. This process keeps the developers safe from lawsuits from, say, Chevrolet, saying that they did not have permission to use their intellectual property for the game. So, as long as it's called Lizard, it's fine. Even if it looks exactly the same as any other truck, it doesn't matter. It's technically not that truck, just heavily inspired. All in all, mods are the lifeline that this game lives on. Without mods, the game would be a little bland and lower quality. I mean, just look at these two tractors I have here side by side. One higher quality, while the other is it lacks a bit. Gameplay wise, it is alright. It gets a little repetitive since the whole game is to plant, fertilize, harvest, sell. Plant, fertilize, harvest, sell. Plant, fertilize, harvest, sell. Over and over. There are little things that can distract you from the cycle, such as cattle or forestry. But there's only so much you can do before you are tired of the game. There are times when you will say, one more field, then I'll call it quits, but in reality you'll probably plant all the fields before realizing that it is 3 a.m. and that you have to get up at 6 a.m. to get to class on time. But these times are not too often. From a starter's perspective, the game can be quite daunting with many mechanics and technical terms that are confusing. But thankfully the devs have thought of this and have a game support page inside the game. Since nobody buys the disc versions of the game anymore, and even if you did buy the disc version of the game, you probably wouldn't open the instruction manual anyways. There are many ways to play the game, as I had said earlier. Most of them have instructions in the game, but as I had also stated earlier, mods are the lifeline of this game. They have added in more content than the devs sometimes do between each game. Unfortunately, these extra things do not come with instructions in-game, so you will either be reading the readme.txt file, or going to some obscure forum called Farmer John's Farming Emporium of farming things that relate to farming.farming.com, where everyone is named John and will only have a small piece of what you need to know. Well, it's either that or go to Reddit. Overall, it's a good game if you have time to spend on it. The base game alone, it's alright, but it really shines when you add mods into the mix. The devs have a great idea and good execution, but have just a few more bugs to hammer out and features to add before the game is perfect. I would give it 7 tractors out of 10 because it's replayable. There are many ways to play it. You can do what you want in the game, but because it's repetitive, you're going to get tired of it quickly.